How are you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today is Monday, September 2nd, starting a new month, but also we're just a few days away from starting the official 2024 NFL regular season. We have two games on store for us this week, on Thursday and on Friday for the first time in NFL history, but not only that, we're going to get to those games later on in the week, but today I thought I'd cover some more things that will impact the NFL season as a whole for a couple teams, right? Starting with the 49ers. What is going on with Trent Williams? We are now in a practice week officially with games taking place on the weekend. So when is that contract going to get done for Trent Williams? Then also we're going to talk about, similarly with Jamar Chase and the Cincinnati Bengals, what is their status looking like? Is Jamar Chase going to hold out into the regular season? Similar to Trent Williams, we're going to get to that in the next segment. And then also, Josh Jacobs obviously signs with the Green Bay Packers this offseason, but there was some interest from the Chiefs and the New York Giants apparently. So we're going to get into why he said he didn't want to join the Chiefs especially, and some other reasons on why that was, and of course some more topics down the line as well. So make sure to stay tuned, and also please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. But before we jump into the segment on Trent Williams, if you guys ever have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share on anything I say or on any of the topics, we have an awesome opportunity for you guys to do that here. It's always better when you guys add your input into anything we say on not just this show, but also all the shows across the network. And now there's an easy way to do that. You guys are able to drop your thoughts in the chat box using the new super chat feature we have available for you guys starting recently. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. Not only that, but it does help out this channel a lot, and also it does bring a lot more excitement, a lot more interactive action onto this show. So go ahead and use that whenever you guys get the chance. But also, if you do prefer to use the alternative option, you can still use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net, to tip, donate, and leave your comment or question there. We always appreciate your guys' amazing support, and we're always so thankful to have you guys as part of our community by leaving your thoughts with the new super chat feature available to you guys on these shows. But now we can start off by talking about Trent Williams, right? Arguably as important and as significant as it was with Brandon Ayuk, right? We spent so much time talking about Brandon Ayuk, and I think most people got to the point, especially if your team wasn't involved, anything to do with Brandon Ayuk, you just wanted to stop hearing his name and stop hearing all the rumors that came out every other day. But while that all was going on, Trent Williams also was not showing up to the 49ers practices. He was absent from training camp. He is holding out, as opposed to Brandon Ayuk, who was there but just was not practicing. And now we are 7 days away exactly from the start of their regular season, because they do kick off on Monday against the New York Jets at Levi Stadium, and Trent Williams still isn't there. We are in a practice week, and we are getting closer to, getting this deal done, hopefully, because you'd think that now during the week you want all your players there to game plan for what the New York Jets are going to throw at you. Obviously, all the hype around them, Rodgers coming in, their defense, one of the better defenses in the NFL, and you don't have your starting left tackle there. Why is that, and when can we expect something to happen, right? It seems like there is still a bit of a standoff, apparently, because Williams continues to hold out because of no movement, obviously, on his deal. And ESPN's Jeremy Fowler actually reported over the weekend on where Trent Williams stands on this situation and what could we expect going forward from this deal, when he mentioned that the 49ers have work to do. I'm told Trent Williams is not happy, and the threat of him missing games is real. A lot of times that's a negotiation pull. I don't sense it is right now. He's made $150 million in his career. He's got no guaranteed money left on his deal, and that also Jeremy Fowler added that the 49ers and Williams remain at a standstill over his contract. But that last statement there is the biggest issue with all of this. He's got no guaranteed money left on his deal. And I know Trent Williams is clearly a veteran in the NFL, right? He's clearly in his latter stages of his career, but he still remains one of the best left tackles and arguably one of the 49ers' best players just in general. And he is still like 34, 35 years old. To have him playing at this level, they shouldn't take it for granted, and I'm not saying they are, but with this contract now, you are 7 days away, and having him just sit there, basically not contributing everything is a big deal, mainly because you are playing that New York Jets defense. And while I guess they are fortunate that Hassan Reddick isn't playing right now, he's also holding out for his contract with the New York Jets. They still provide a very prominent pass rush with Quinnen Williams, Jermaine Johnson, and all their front sevens. Quincy Williams there on the second level with C.J. Mosley. They're a very aggressive defense because they're able to play a lot of man coverage, mostly because they have Sauce Gardner taking away one side of the field. And now, with that being the case, you overwhelm the 49ers if the Jets just decide to bring a lot of pressure and be extra aggressive because they know that Trent Williams isn't going to be there protecting Brock Purdy's blind side. So this is obviously a big deal. This is obviously still a concern now that we are pretty much starting the NFL regular season already. It doesn't technically start until Thursday with the first game, but this is a practice week. Now everyone's game planning for everything, and you want to know if Trent's going to be there or not. Kyle Shanahan has mentioned before that he is starting the game plan around Trent Williams not being there, but that sounds nice for the first week, and they are playing a tough week one opponent, but Trent doesn't seem like the guy that is going to bluff on a lot of things that he says. It always feels like he means what he's saying. He's not messing around, especially about his contract and on the fact also that he is a veteran player. That isn't something that they would take obviously very lightly. And of course, with him being under contract and everything like that, he is subject to fines. I'm not sure if the 49ers have gone that route just yet. They didn't go that route with Brandon Ayuk, but I'm sure once the regular season starts, we're going to see who, takes the first step, who throws the first punch if the 49ers are going to start fining him, and whether or not that affects anything that Trent Williams decides to do with his holdout. But also, the statements continued on here from Jeremy Fowler, which I thought was pretty interesting as well, that he added. He said, he's the fourth highest paid left tackle right now, despite being the best the last few years, and he feels like this could have been addressed a lot earlier, and San Francisco sort of balked on it. He's going to make them wait even longer. And before I address that last part again, or that middle part, where he says that he feels that San Francisco could have addressed this a lot earlier, right now the backup to Trent Williams is set to be Jalen Moore, with Trent Williams being out. So I'm not too familiar with Jalen Moore. I don't know how confident they are in Jalen Moore as a left tackle right away. Of course, it's a drop-off from Trent, but that part there in the statement from Jeremy Fowler where he said that Trent Williams feels that the 49ers could have addressed this a lot earlier and that they sort of balked on it. It brings up the question that I had a couple days ago. I might have addressed it on the show, but in discussing Brandon Ayuk and Trent Williams, right? Almost I don't want to say who's more significant, just because the 49ers obviously want to keep both of them and would love to extend both of them, but they decided to go with Brandon Ayuk first. He was making was causing more of a uproar, more just trouble with his contract extension, you can say. So I can understand why they went with Brandon. That's been carrying out the entire offseason, it seems like, whereas with Trent, no one's really brought up what he's been doing, what he's been saying. He's been kept relatively quiet throughout this whole thing, just waiting for the 49ers to give him more guaranteed money. But back to that question, should they have potentially worked out Trent's deal before Brandon? I probably would have said yes to that, just because it felt like Brandon was already in a situation where you knew the outcome, and I don't think that the 49ers were going to allow Brandon to still be on their team and hold out into the regular season. I thought that was the last outcome. I thought before that they were going to trade him or they were going to figure out an extension. There was no way they were just going to have him sit there and not practice or play in the regular season games. So you had a likely outcome before it started affecting the games that mattered, right? But with Trent Williams, he's obviously not going to go anywhere. And with him, you have him just sitting there, not contributing anything at all towards these games where, again, Jeremy Fowler, and it seems like the main consensus around this is that Trent will have no problem sitting out of these games, and you can get by potentially 1 or 2 games with this, but the longer it carries out, not only is that a distraction like it was with Brandon Ayuk, but it could affect, Brock Purdy, protecting his blind side and everything like that. You want this to go as smoothly as possible, and in a year where there's so much riding on the 49ers, right? There's so much pressure on when they're going to win a Super Bowl, when is Kyle Shanahan going to win a Super Bowl, and looking towards the future now with these extensions. You extend Brandon Ayuk, you're going to have to extend Brock Purdy, and if you give Trent Williams this guaranteed money, which I expect them to do so, how does that affect, Brock's future deal? How does this affect Debo and whether or not you're able to keep him or able to keep anybody else? This year, I mentioned it, I think, on Friday, that this last year could be the final year that you have all these core group of players together under one team, so you have to win it. I said that on Friday. I said that same sentiment, right, that you have to win it this year if you're going to have the same group of players, because in 2025 and probably 2026, you're not going to have a few of these guys because you just can't afford to keep all of them, and Trent is definitely one of them that you want to keep, at least as long as he wants to keep playing. And the longer you keep him holding out, it's going to affect the long-term goals, obviously, you have for winning a Super Bowl. And I think just the 49ers now just need to forget about everything other than just winning a Super Bowl, and they have to figure this out. Probably, I would say, today's Monday, so any later than Wednesday, I would really start to have a problem with Trent Williams probably not going to be playing that game on Monday because he hasn't had any practice time, and if the contract's not done, he's not going to step foot back on the practice field. So that's where the situation with Trent Williams stands right now, providing a bit of an update from some reporters, giving just an idea of what Trent Williams is feeling like right now, and there's still no indication of when this could get done. They have a day or two, like I just mentioned, for this to get done in a acceptable amount of time for Trent Williams to be ready to go on Monday, but we'll see. That game's going to be huge on Monday against the New York Jets, a good test of where each of these teams are, and you'd like to have all your players there, obviously, but we'll see if Trent Williams will be active or not for that game. But we're not going to move too far off of these contract situations. We're going to go swiftly into another one, very similar, almost identical, with Ja'Marr Chase. Where does he stand on potentially holding out? Will the Cincinnati Bengals give him a contract extension before that becomes a real possibility this week? We're going to get into all of that and what some reports are saying as to what kind of deal Ja'Marr Chase is chasing from the Cincinnati Bengals. So that is coming up right after the break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
We are back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, not moving too far off of the contract talks with the two biggest remaining players that still need to figure out what they're going to do with their contracts, and more so, I should say, what each of their teams is going to do with these players and their contracts, because we just finished talking about Trent Williams, and is he going to hold out into the regular season, and the Bengals and their star wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase are facing the same sort of standoff right now as to whether or not Jamar's going to get a contract extension or not this year, because it looked like it was going to be a great sort of development last week, almost exactly a week from today. It was last Sunday when Ja'Marr Chase began practicing. It was a big announcement, right, that he was back participating, not just showing up there in street clothes. He was showing up, practicing, helmet on and everything. It looked like this was coming to a resolution, right, sooner rather than later last week. But then, Zach Taylor, ironically, on how it all played out, he confirmed that Ja'Marr Chase was going to practice all last week and that he, again, felt confident that this was all going to be worked out in the end before the regular season. But, of course, as soon as you say something, the complete opposite happens. Ja'Marr Chase again went back to not practicing the rest of the week once Zach Taylor said that. Now, I'm not sure, right, personally, if he meant to do that way, that if he heard Zach Taylor say that and then he just decided to not practice, or if this was all premeditated. Regardless, it was pretty funny, pretty ironic how it all played out, and Zach Taylor even mentioned afterwards that he probably spoke too soon on that situation, and now after the actions of last week, where we thought this was heading towards a amicable, solution with both sides, now we're back to the same old, asking the same old question: will Ja'Marr Chase play, or will he hold out into the regular season? And now he's obviously looking for a massive deal, and he has earned one, I would say. I don't think a lot of people would dispute that because of how just seamless the transition has been for Ja'Marr right as soon as he gets into the NFL. He has those struggles in the preseason, dropping all the balls, and then once the regular season starts, it's like you had a whole new player, the same guy you got from LSU, forgot about the preseason completely, and just right away considered one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. But what's so unusual about this deal is that obviously he isn't in the last year of his deal. He's not in the fifth-year option like CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, where he still has the final year of his contract, his rookie contract, which is this year, and then he has that fifth-year option next year, technically. So the Bengals don't really have to extend him right now. There's no deadline fearing any free agency or anything like that, but the leverage that Ja'Marr Chase does hold is that, unlike any other team, I would probably say, other than probably the Vikings, Ja'Marr Chase is just as important to that team as their quarterback is. And that's saying a lot because Joe Burrow is obviously their quarterback. This team doesn't move anywhere without Joe, but almost similarly, I don't think it moves any further, that much further, than it does without Ja'Marr Chase at all for however many games he decides to miss. So the longer, this has been played out, once I saw Ja'Marr come back to practice on Sunday, I thought that was pretty much it. Once he went back to holding in, technically, just showing up and not practicing, I started to really consider the fact that Ja'Marr is pretty serious about not playing in the regular season, because if you're not going to hold out, why would you just hold back in throughout the practices, right? There's no reason to kind of tease players or tease fans out there that you're back on Sunday and then you're back to holding in, right? There's no reason to do that unless you're really considering holding out of the regular season without that contract extension. So that's the sort of back and forth that we're facing right now. And now, what sort of contract that Ja'Marr is looking for? It's going to be high up there. He's shooting for a CD, a Justin Jefferson type of deal. And that's exactly what Ian Rappaport reported over the weekend on what he is hearing on what kind of deal Ja'Marr Chase is looking for. He said, "My understanding is that the two sides are still discussing a long-term extension that, if he got it, would make him either tied for the highest paid wide receiver with Ja'Marr Chase or beating Justin Jefferson by 1 cent, which I believe is the goal by Ja'Marr Chase." And it makes sense, right? He's definitely earned a contract like that, but again, for him to get a big deal like that so early on is very rare and unusual, because you look at now the facts around this whole situation with Jamar and being still 2 years left on his contract in this situation. You look at everything that is and could happen in this situation, right? Because if you extend Jamar Chase right now, it would allow Cincinnati to spread his cap hit over 2 additional years, right? Because he has those 2 years left on his rookie deal. If he gets a 3-year deal, they can extend it to a 5-year deal, technically, right? Extend that cap hit. If it's a 4-year deal, it's 6 years, technically, they could extend it, right? And so on and so on. So that is a benefit, to extend that cap hit a little bit longer if they decide to do that. But with this being so unprecedented, you have players with 2 years left rarely sit out over a new deal. You know, you don't really get a case where you still have a year left on your rookie deal, then still the 5th-year option. Very rarely do you see a player hold out in this situation, and especially for non-quarterbacks, you can maybe understand it for a quarterback, but for anybody else, it's extremely rare, and it's even more unlikely that they end up getting that deal, because again, the team doesn't feel like they need to do anything right now. And then you sort of are just in a moment where, all right, if Jamar's not going to move, if he's really serious about holding out, and the team, the Cincinnati Bengals, don't again feel an intensity or an urge to extend him because they simply don't have to, then we're just in that same spot again, right? Just waiting to see, like Trent Williams and the 49ers, who makes the first move, who throws the first punch, and who sort of caves to the others, just stand still right now. Who caves to the others' needs right now in terms of figuring out what they want at this point in time. But then you might look at other receivers in this situation that have also gotten extensions with 2 years left, right? You might point to Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, who also had 2 years left on their deals, but they got their extensions this year, similarly to Jamar Chase. They were also in Jamar Chase's draft class, so they've got their contract extensions. What makes it different with Jamar Chase, right? He's better. He's proven to have better stats, more, I would say, value to his team compared to Jalen alongside Tyreek, and also Devontae Smith alongside A.J. Brown. Jamar is that guy for the Bengals, so they got their extensions. Why can't Jamar Chase get his at this point, the exact same time that those guys got their extensions? But the difference with that is that Jalen and Devontae weren't really threatening on holding out at any point this offseason. It almost came, to me at least, as a surprise that, they were going to get those extensions. They were only 3-year deals, right? Because they had those 2 additional years added on. So they're really under contract for the next 5 years. But it was more of a amicable situation with those 2 guys, right? Because as much as I heard about that their extension period was coming up, I never really thought that it was going to happen, pretty soon. Devontae's really surprised me, but again, another receiver that has earned an extension. He's not making the kind of money that Justin Jefferson or Jamar or CeeDee Lamb are making on their deals, but he got his extension, and it just, became a matter of, he said it himself, he was just going to wait for all of this to play out, and if it happens, it happens, and it all came to fruition in a very friendly sort of way. Same thing with Jalen. All you heard about Jalen and the extension talks with the Dolphins was that it was going to happen. They were going to exercise that 5th-year option, and soon after that, he got his extension, another 3-year deal, and he's making around $28 million based on those 3 years. So now with Jamar, it hasn't gone as smoothly just because he is holding out. He isn't participating in practice, and unlike those 2 guys, he is threatening of not playing in the regular season, where those other receivers were just not doing that at this point in time. So it makes it a little bit tougher, because you are backing the team, that drafted you, that you are on, into a corner where, they feel like this is very unnecessary, I'm assuming. And their owner, even Mike Brown, said that discussing extensions right now isn't the most optimal time to do so. He'd rather wait for the offseason, and that probably was going to be their plan. Wait for Jamar to play this year, and then next offseason in the spring, similarly to April and May when Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle got their deals, then to work out something at that time with Jamar Chase. But right now, it seems like Jamar is very adamant about getting it done right now. And according also, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler continued on and said that the Bengals have started to intensify their efforts to get this extension done with Jamar Chase, but nothing is imminent and nothing right now is close to really happening. The Bengals remain hopeful that something can happen, but right now the Bengals have tried to approach this with a bit more urgency as we get closer to the start of the regular season. And technically, with this odd situation with Jamar and the Bengals, Jamar doesn't technically have the traditional leverage that you see with some of these players, right? You look at Dak, he has a no trade clause, no tag clause, and other receivers, CeeDee, Brandon, like I mentioned, they're on their last year. So Jamar doesn't have any of that leverage, but it's so unique in the way that Jamar is very much so very dependent or very crucial to the success of the Bengals. So if you don't feel like there's any urgency there, fine. Jamar's just going to probably sit out, and then it becomes a real will of just standing your ground and determining if you really want him back, which obviously the Bengals do. Obviously the Bengals want him to play, but going back to last week with Chad Ochocinco's comments mentioning that, sort of hinting to the fact that Jamar could also hold out, and at the time it seemed pretty light, like it wasn't really to be taken seriously, but now the closer we are to the regular season, it could become a lot more troubling for the Bengals to figure out this situation. And fortunately for them, though, they have one of the easier schedules, at least in their division. They have the easiest schedule in the AFC North, and their first game is against the New England Patriots, which, no disrespect to the Patriots, Jamar's not going to be the difference maker probably in that game, considering where the Patriots are right now. But you could go by with 1 week, but then the next week, if this starts to become a habit, much like Trent Williams, then we start getting into this area where the Bengals might just have to cough up the extension right now, which could serve them a little bit better, getting the contract out now. You don't know who or what kind of money you could be facing next offseason if other receivers start getting extensions. So it could become cheaper if you do it now, but again, it just came out of nowhere where Jamar just not practicing, not showing up, and I think it's just taking the Bengals by surprise at this point. So kind of regaining their senses, trying to get this done as best as they can with the timeline now on Sunday at 1 o'clock when they play the Patriots. We're going to see how this all develops over the next few days. By Thursday or Wednesday, like I said with Trent, if nothing's done by then, I don't see why they would throw him out there anyway. Again, playing the Patriots is one thing, but just no practice at all. It makes no sense for them to just play him, and it does provide an opportunity for other receivers, but again, you need Jamar Chase out there, especially because you could be losing T. Higgins next year. So those are your only real two guarantees, T. Higgins and Joe Burrow right now in terms of proven playmakers. We'll see how they resolve this entire thing with Jamar Chase going forward. But the next couple topics are not really contract related, just more so questions that I thought I'd bring up on some of these players. One of them being Josh Jacobs, obviously signing with the Patriots. He reportedly had interest from the Chiefs and also the New York Giants over the offseason. So we're going to talk about whether or not signing with the Green Bay Packers made the bigger impact over signing with the Chiefs or potentially the Giants. Then moving on with another topic, we have the Eagles and why they decided to keep James Bradberry. It felt like a very polarizing topic, so we're going to get into that, what their general manager Howie Roseman said, and whether or not it was a good decision overall to keep him, before we finish off today's episode with some more predictions on the final standings in each division. We have the very anticipated AFC North on today's show, so we're going to get to all of that when we return after this short break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping right back into the action on today's show, some more questions I just wanted to pose you guys on the rest of this episode, starting with the new Green Bay Packers running back Josh Jacobs. He obviously signed this offseason with the Packers, a big 4-year, $48 million deal, which also sent Aaron Jones over to the Minnesota Vikings, but it wasn't without interest from other teams. And what I mean by that is, according to Josh Jacobs himself, he told The Athletic that the Kansas City Chiefs were actually very interested in him this offseason, which, as much as it was a surprise, I would say that he joined the Packers in just such a quick motion with just how everything, just sped up at one time. At one point, Josh was signing with the Packers, and then just very quickly after that, Aaron Jones was going and being traded over to the Minnesota Vikings. That all was a big whirlwind and just how it all played out. But I think signing with the Chiefs would have even been more of a surprise and just more blockbuster, just because of the fact of going within the division and joining the Kansas City Chiefs, which was always going to be a very questionable thing, because in the NFL, and much like any other sport, when a good player joins the reigning champions, he's always going to get killed for it, right? And that's exactly what Josh Jacobs didn't want to do, right? Because in his interview with The Athletic, he said, on the Chiefs, he said, they were trying hard to get me, but there was no way I was going there. I feel like once you are rivals with somebody, you have genuine hate for them. I couldn't see myself in that color, and besides, I never wanted to be the guy that joined the dominant team. I want to be the guy that beats the dominant team, and I would say he's given himself a pretty good chance of doing so, right, with the Packers. And now, getting into this question, in terms of impact and how much it has elevated one of these three teams, potentially, if he joined the Chiefs or arguably the New York Giants, because also that was another reported destination for Josh Jacobs this offseason. According to some, the Giants were also trying to get Josh Jacobs to join their team after what happened with Saquon Barkley, right? Having him leave and having it look worse and worse over the course of the offseason that Saquon wasn't coming back. Josh Jacobs apparently was an option for them, but according to these reports, and I emphasize these because there are some other reports now that say that it wasn't really ever a possibility, that the Giants weren't really that interested in Josh Jacobs, but you can decide on what you believe or not. But we're going to go with the fact that he was an option, and according to these other reports, Josh Jacobs just thought that it wasn't the right fit for him to join New York. And also along those lines, he could have also stayed with the Las Vegas Raiders, but they had a chance to match Green Bay's offer, that $48 million deal, but the Raiders decided that it wasn't in their best interest to do that, so they declined that opportunity, and Josh Jacobs just freely joined the Green Bay Packers. And now, with that being the case, it made me think of, it makes a lot of sense for Josh to go over to the Packers and how prolific their offense is right now, right? Pretty much getting exactly what you got with Aaron Jones, potentially maybe even more, just based on the health factor. Aaron Jones, Josh have both dealt with injuries, but I feel like Josh right now is in a better situation for him to not be as reluctant to get those injuries heading towards the 2024 season. So which one would have made the most impact if Josh Jacobs decided to join any of these teams, the Packers, the Chiefs, or the New York Giants? And to me, I'm going to say it is the Packers, just for a couple of reasons, but I wanted to get to the Chiefs and the Giants first off, because you look at the Chiefs, and what's funny about them, and what's actually very similar to what the New York Giants and what could have been with Josh Jacobs on their team, is that the status and the contention of both of those teams individually wouldn't have changed, I believe, by adding Josh Jacobs in the regular season, if that makes sense, right? Explaining it more, if Josh joins the Chiefs, right, they're already a good team. They're already probably a lot of people's favorite to make it back to the Super Bowl. A lot of people's favorite to win that division anyway, be the number 1 seed in the AFC. Josh joining a good running back also in Isaiah Pacheco, doesn't really change that in a lot of people's eyes. They just see Josh Jacobs joining, and it's like, all right, like it just makes it even more of a easy call that the Chiefs are going to make it back to the Super Bowl. It doesn't change how people look at them that much in terms of impact and really changing their stance in the hierarchy of each conference. It doesn't really do that with the Chiefs. And similarly to the Giants, I think, yeah, it would have been a great replacement for Saquon if they got Josh Jacobs right after that. But still, looking at the Giants and what they are right now, the support system around not only the running back, but the quarterback himself, Daniel Jones, and how he's facing a lot of scrutiny, a lot of question marks around him, whether or not he is the guy or not. If you add Josh Jacobs to that, as good as Saquon Barkley was, Josh Jacobs, very talented running back as well, and even still, they really weren't going anywhere too much, whether or not they kept Saquon. They could have kept Saquon and added Josh Jacobs, and I don't think people would have looked at them that differently if they had both of them. But obviously now they have neither of them, and even still without either of them, I don't think people think higher or lower of them. People still think that they are going to have a rough season, and I don't think it was going to change whether or not Josh Jacobs was there as the lead back, with Saquon, without both of them. It didn't change their status or their contention. But now, with the Packers, I think you get a mix a little bit of both, because you keep the same level of running back basically with Aaron Jones, because you are running a running back by committee ideally with A.J. Dillon, but now A.J. Dillon is on the IR, season-ending IR, so he is not going to be playing at all this year, which could mean that we could see a lot more of Josh Jacobs, or whether or not the Packers are willing to give more of the bulk of the carries to their rookie running back, Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. Whether they decide on either case will yet to be determined, but I think you still keep that same level of running back with Aaron or with Josh Jacobs, and also it does push you over the limit a little bit, because the situation with Aaron Jones was that he was also looking for an extension. I think he has 1 more year left, if I'm not mistaken, on his contract. 1 year there with the Minnesota Vikings, and then after this year, they'll decide if they want to extend him further than that. But I think the issue with Aaron Jones and the Packers was that, like many running backs in the NFL currently, there are some doubts over whether or not you want to extend that running back 26, 25 years old, 27 years old to a long-term deal, because of how the running backs are thought of nowadays, right? Very expendable players compared to everybody else, which we won't get into it more so. We've already talked enough of how running backs are underpaid, but they're considered an expendable position right now in the NFL. And with Aaron, that was a doubt whether or not he was going to extend with the Packers or not. So bringing in a good, very capable replacement in Josh Jacobs was great. Not only keeping them at their very high status already within the NFC, but also I think elevating them a little bit more, because the rest of the team has also elevated, I think, just over the course of this offseason. More people are starting to throw in a lot more of an investment, a lot more of a gamble on the Packers, if you would even call it that, in their second year now under Jordan Love being the official starting quarterback. And I think everyone was convinced of what they saw last year from Jordan Love. So now they expect even more, and adding a guy like Josh Jacobs just elevates that or enhances that even more so this year, with adding Josh along with Jordan Love. You have, forgetting his first name, the rookie wide receiver Dontavius Wicks, I think it is his name, Romeo Doubs, Jalen Reed, Christian Watson, all these guys. it keeps the offense at that level, but also you could even argue, if you want to get into it, makes them a little bit better with Josh Jacobs coming in. Now, how they figured it out with A.J. Dillon not being there is another discussion, but I thought it made more of an impact joining the Packers just for that reason, that with the Chiefs and the Giants, you weren't really going to move too much, and now with the Packers, they are more so of would I call them a sneaky team to bet on? I think a few months ago, I think they would have been considered that, but now, closer to the regular season, I'm hearing a lot about people thinking very highly of Jordan Love, and not to say that I don't, or don't think he deserves his extension or anything like that, but it's all happened very quickly, and now the expectations from last year compared to this year is crazy just how much they've changed, and in part, mostly because they have added a guy like Josh Jacobs to complement this offense, and really, I think for a lot of people, elevate it to new heights is what I'm sensing from what a lot of people are saying in the media nationally. But not only that, with these expectations now, I think Jordan Love is capable, of carrying on his momentum from last year, but they are going to be facing a tougher schedule, if I'm not mistaken. I think it is a top 5 or a top 6 hardest schedule in the NFL. So all that being the case, a lot of people remain high on this team, and the fact that they added Josh Jacobs, I think would have decided whether or not I was high on this team, but they've kept the same level across the offense from running back. All the receivers are still there, obviously. Now Jordan Love, as good as he was last year, I think people are still expecting to see a jump from him in 2024. These guys, these two, Jordan Love and Josh Jacobs, should complement each other very nicely. The health question is still there with Josh. Hopefully he stays healthy enough for playing the main part of the regular season. How much Marshawn Lloyd, their rookie running back, gets involved, I'll be interested to see that. But the Packers, I think, did a very good job of addressing the running back right away and not being too scared or doubtful or hesitant on paying a running back $12 million per year. They said, forget all of that. We have a good team. Let's add a good running back. And I think more teams should approach it that way. And Josh could be a very big benefactor of it, joining a very, very prolific offense in Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. But that's how I feel about it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section on whether or not you would have thought he would have made a bigger impact on the Chiefs or potentially the New York Giants. Leave your guys' thoughts in the comment section. But we have 2 more topics to get to. We're going to mention James Bradberry and the Eagles, whether or not it was a good decision, just plain and simple, of the Eagles keeping James Bradberry. Should they have done it? Should they have released them? Maybe opened up that spot for another player? We're going to get into all those options and why Howie Roseman decided to keep his veteran safety now along for another year. So stay tuned. We're going to be right back talking some more about the Eagles and James Bradberry.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, we're focusing our attention now on the Philadelphia Eagles, and they do play this week. They do play for the first time ever in Brazil for an NFL game down there, and a player on their roster who will actually make part of the 53-man roster now that we are in the official week leading up to their game is James Bradberry. When going over the transactions from the cut deadline back a couple weeks ago on, I think it was a Tuesday, not last week, but maybe the week before that, it seemed like this question about James Bradberry being on the Eagles, it was a bigger talking point than I was expecting, because I felt like the way James Bradberry was, the contract that they gave him, it feels like a lot of people in the organization, the teammates and everything like that, wanted to keep James Bradberry around. He was well received from everybody. It seemed like there was no issues there, right? But more so, it seemed like the fans, the Philadelphia Eagles fans, were pretty surprised that James made the final 53-man roster for a couple of reasons, right? The biggest one being that in 2023, it couldn't have gone much worse for James Bradberry, allowing a league-high 9 touchdowns while being in coverage on that play. Also, we saw Philadelphia go out and draft 2 corners, pretty much addressing that matter of fact. Allowing 9 touchdowns just yourself is just unacceptable. So the Eagles go out and draft 2 young, capable of starting defensive backs, and now everyone's looking at James Bradberry like, rightly so, that this could be the year that he is moved on from, because they did give him that extension, which makes it a little bit tricky a couple seasons ago. But to everyone's surprise, James Bradberry made the 53-man roster, but not as a defensive back, more so as a safety. He, a couple weeks ago, actually now a month ago probably, he offered to move to safety himself, and he's been getting a couple reps there this offseason, being deployed there. You saw it in the Patriots game and some other preseason games as well. But right now, with that how it is, James Bradberry at safety, it still doesn't fill a lot of people with too much assurance there, just because you look at the facts just of James Bradberry and playing safety. He has never played a snap at safety in an NFL game, has not played on special teams since 2021 in case the Eagles wanted to deploy him and find a role for him on special teams. And just the matter of fact that he is a safety, definitely not going to start, but to keep him around as a backup, at safety at his age of 30, he's at least 31, I want to say. The Eagles haven't kept a backup safety at that age since Tim Huck in 2001. So pretty much in my lifetime, they haven't had a safety back there at James Bradberry's age. I was born in 2001, and they haven't had one through the 23 years that I've been alive. So that is very unprecedented by the Eagles to do that, and they already have 4 other safeties on their roster. So all of that to say that it was a very clear pathway to just getting rid of James Bradberry in this sense. But again, to everyone's surprise, they decided to keep Bradberry on for another year. And now that we are in the week leading up to their game, we are officially in the week 1 period for the Eagles, because they play on Friday. They can't necessarily move on from James Bradberry right now, or it wouldn't make too much sense to do so. And I'll explain why after Howie Roseman explains why he decided to keep James Bradberry. He said, "When you see him play safety every day here and see his ability to diagnose his football instincts, I think for us, that's a transition. That's a different position than playing outside corner. He's got a different skill set. It's a long season. Having a veteran player like that on the roster that we know we can rely on when called upon, we felt it was very important." And that is what you expect, I guess, from Howie Roseman. Again, it feels like people within the organization, players as much as organization members, the general manager, the coaches, everybody likes James Bradberry, wants to keep him around. They really are pushing to keep James Bradberry around. But why I mentioned before, why it could be difficult to even move on from him right now, or it wouldn't make too much sense to do so, is because James Bradberry now is considered a vested veteran player, meaning that his 2024 salary will be guaranteed if he's on the roster on the week of their first game week, which again is on Friday. So we are pretty much in this week already. So to cut him right now and move on from him or trade him, you are still giving him guaranteed money. So it wouldn't make too much sense to just get rid of him at this point in time. And that is why now we are in a weird situation of whether or not, what are we going to see from him now? Because I don't expect them to trade him. There was some reports of the Eagles potentially keeping him on the roster, just having the preseason play out just to raise his stock a little bit more. Maybe some teams are interested now seeing him play safety and are thinking, wow, maybe we could, benefit from that. Maybe we'll work out a trade with the Eagles. But now we are already in the game week of their first week 1 matchup against the Packers. So their Eagles are already giving him guaranteed money, so it doesn't make too much sense now to hold on to him or get rid of him, at this point in time. And Howie Roseman was also reluctant to, at the time of saying that statement a couple weeks ago now, that guaranteeing James Bradberry a roster spot, mentioning that no one's spot is guaranteed, but right now it's looking like quite the opposite, just because you are supposed to give him that guaranteed money. And James Bradberry, again, last year as a corner, was rated the last defensive back, or the lowest defensive back, according to Pro Football Focus. And with that being the case, I'm assuming we're going to see him more at safety, if anything, barring any injuries or anything like that to Darius Slay, Kelly Ringo, Quinyon Mitchell, or even Cooper DeJean. I'm feeling that we're going to see him at safety a lot more, which could mean that he probably wouldn't play too much. And also, defensive coordinator Vic Fangio has also been on the train of singing his praises this offseason. So, weird situation where people, I think, want to see James Bradberry get back to the player that he was, because he made the All-Pro and was considered a Pro Bowler just in that season that he got that extension from the Eagles. But now, to see a drop-off like that, Philadelphia Eagles fans are not ones to wait around per se and maybe just keep thinking that something will change and maybe giving players a second chance, especially for a rough period like James Bradberry had, and you throw in there the collapse that they had towards the end of the year, much to blame for their defense, actually. So with that all being the case, they wanted to see change this offseason, and they did change their coordinators. They got new linebackers, they got new players on the defensive line, but still James Bradberry's kept around. And I thought that mostly the Eagles fans were ones that were petitioning to get rid of him, thinking that they saw enough last year. But James Bradberry probably will stay on this roster the entirety of 2024. And for right now, did it make sense for them to keep Bradberry? In the logistical answer, probably not. I feel like you could have used that for somebody else, like I mentioned before, that could benefit you as a team with special teams. James Bradberry hasn't done that in a while. Maybe getting some snaps in dime packages, nickel packages, or anything like that. Again, Bradberry hasn't really done that too much in a long time. Not to say that he can't do it at all, but it's still going to be an adjustment, and you have other safeties at his position, right? You're carrying 4 other ones at this point in time. You have young players that are wanting to, use up and be used in this Eagles defense. So for James Bradberry to be thrown out there, and also he didn't put out the best performances in the preseason as well. That again was another point of emphasis for fans to kind of jump on him and think that, this wasn't worth keeping for James Bradberry on this team. So right now it was a little bit confusing on how the Eagles, played all of this out. To move on from him or cut him right now, I think would be even more of a surprise than actually keeping him like they did, just because they owe him that guaranteed money. So where will he play? At this point in time, a lot of that will be dictated on the injuries, on certain developments of some young players. They're very high on a guy like Quinyon Mitchell. So seeing his development, he right now, just based on the reports that I have seen, he is playing more so in a nickel and dime package as a slot corner. So whether or not he moves to the outside, they move maybe James Bradberry inside. If they do that, they could explore different avenues with this, obviously, as well. They have Eli Rogers, I think, also coming back and playing on this secondary. So that's another name just added on top of that before James Bradberry. Of course, you look at the benefits off the field as a veteran, being a teacher to some of these young guys, but on the field is obviously what matters at the end of the day. And to say that I wasn't confused or surprised that James Bradberry wasn't cut would be a lie, but I think it won't become too much of a problem really on the field unless you are dealing with a crazy amount of injuries like you were last year. And for that to happen 2 years in a row, I think would be very rare to see, but you can't always be too sure about that. So a problem, when this would really become a problem for the Eagles and Bradbury, would be if he does happen to come in and play at safety, a position that he's not too comfortable per se, and he makes a couple mistakes, takes some wrong angles, wrong reads on some plays. That's when this decision will come back to bite the Eagles. But those are all hypotheticals right now. Obviously, we are just projecting, but it definitely rubbed some people the wrong way. Just very confusing as to why they kept him. But hopefully for Bradbury, for the Eagles as well, he can regain some of that confidence, some of that level of play that he showed in a couple seasons ago. Because just to say that he lost it, I think is unrealistic. So I think it's just more so a fact of the level of confidence that he has right now riding into this season. I think it'll do him good to kind of sit on the bench and watch a little bit, but hopefully it all works out for the Eagles. Hopefully it all plans out the way that they want to going forward. But that'll be it for that segment. We have one more to get to on today's show. Predicting how the AFC North will finish this year is one of the tougher ones I had to do. So we're going to get into how I think it's going to end and why I believe there could be a repeat champion this year in the AFC North. So stay tuned. We're going to come back with discussing that division after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show, continuing our series of predicting the final standing for each division in the NFL. And we've gone through all of the NFC already. Now we start with the other conference, the AFC, and the much anticipated AFC North, because when I was making these rankings, my predictions, I was thinking back to, I think I did a rankings of each team, not predicting how they were going to finish, but just based on the level of team that they were and how that has changed up until now. And this might have been one of the closest ones I've ever done, and I'm still having some second thoughts about how I've ranked them, but I'm not going to change now. We're going to show you guys how I feel like the AFC North is going to finish in 2024. Again, in my opinion, probably the most difficult division in all of the NFL for a couple reasons that I'm going to mention here on this segment. But yeah, the fourth team, the Cleveland Browns, I think to a lot of people's surprise, I have them finishing last, and that just boils down to the fact of my doubts over Deshaun Watson. It's insane to think about Deshaun and just a few years ago, 4 years ago, thinking back to when everybody was in that bidding war for him and him getting the most guaranteed money ever in the NFL. And now to find ourselves at this point with him having doubts about his injuries, whether or not he can regain some of that momentum, or whether or not we can see some of that Houston Deshaun Watson that the Browns paid for and that they traded so much for. I think it's teetering right now on the brink of being considered one of the worst trades in NFL history, just again for the plain fact that the Browns gave up so much for him in terms of money, obviously. And you look at all those picks that they gave the Texans, right? And having it turn out to Will Anderson, C.J. Stroud, Tank Dell, Joe Mixon, and all these guys, Christian Harris as well, I can't forget about Christian Harris, but having it turn into all of their basically brand new team that they have, a very good contending Texans team now, and you look at what the Browns got on the other side of it, I think it's right now teetering on the brink of being considered one of the worst trades ever if Deshaun doesn't show you anything this year, just because over the last 2 years he's dealt with injuries, and I know that's something that obviously nobody wants to face, right, in the NFL as a player, but it is something that has happened, and even when he has played, the production that he has produced out there for the Browns hasn't been too convincing in the limited amount of time he has been out there. And also, you look at their schedule this year, the Browns actually have the toughest schedule in the NFL with their opponents that they will be facing having a 55 win percentage for 2023. They'll have 12 games against teams with a winning record in this year. They had a winning record in 2023. 6 of their 8 home games this year will be against teams that had a 500 or better record in 2023 as well. So you have a lot better competition coming in. The doubts, the concerns potentially starting to come up about Deshaun Watson are seriously something to consider, at least for myself, seeing him, being a Steelers fan, seeing him play. The limited amount of times, obviously, because of injuries, but the times that he has played out there hasn't really looked too similar to what we saw in Houston for a couple of reasons, right? Adjusting, there's always that adjustment period, but there does come a point where you become a little bit impatient now with Deshaun, and if he is dealing with that shoulder injury, so that's something else to watch this year on how it develops, how fully healthy he looks. But again, there's too much questions about a quarterback for a division that's so tough for me to really be convinced that they are going to finish third or second or even first in this division, in my opinion. And that's something they haven't done, I think, since at least like 1980 or something like that, making the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. So that's also another thing that they'd have to, overcome and doing for the first time in a long time. So I had the Browns finishing last, but it wasn't as confusing as doing the next 3 teams, because at number 3 I have the Cincinnati Bengals, and even now I'm still having thoughts about changing them to number 1 potentially. I'm not changing number 2, and I'll get to that and I'll explain that in a few seconds. But number 3, I decided to put the Bengals there just because it is a lot of pressure, depending on how everything plays out, potentially on Joe Burrow. And what I mean by that is that you already had to deal with the loss of Tyler Boyd. Joe Mixon's now gone. T. Higgins looks to be on the last year of his deal. And Jamar Chase, nobody knows if he's going to play. Is he going to hold out? Are they going to extend him? If you, for some reason, don't have Jamar Chase, you look at the weapons that Joe Burrow has at his disposal. Yeah, they feel good about Andre Ioshivas and Jermaine Burton, who's a rookie, but they haven't really shown you anything yet to really consider them a guarantee that they're going to step up for anybody mentioning Jamar Chase or T. Higgins or anything like that. You have T. Higgins as the one guarantee playmaker from that Super Bowl team. So to have everybody else be a question mark, even Jamar Chase, I think if you want to talk about available weapons and wide receiver rooms, you look at their receiver room without Jamar Chase potentially, and it doesn't look that much better than the Steelers, for example, right? Everyone always saying that they only have George Pickens. If the Bengals only walk out their week 1 with just T. Higgins, there's not much difference in terms of quality available weapons that you have for the Bengals, Joe Burrow, and the Steelers with Russell Wilson. And on top of that, they are looking on the other side of the ball for a starting defensive back outside of Mike Hilton and Cam Taylor-Britt. It could be between a couple guys there, Dax Hill being one of them. So how they decide to line up with either one of them is still a question. Trey Hendrickson, talking about contracts with Jamar Chase, is another player that is of major importance for the Bengals. He's also wanting some more guaranteed money, a whole new contract for him from the Bengals. He has put in a trade request, much like T. Higgins, and that's also something else that they have to figure out. So they have T. Higgins dealing with contract issues, right? He's on the last year of his deal. probably not going to have enough to keep him. Then Trey Hendrickson. Now Jamar Chase is also holding in and not practicing. So those are three of your most important players feeling unsure of their contract situation and now affecting their playing ability on the football field. And I just think it's a lot on Joe Burrow, who you can't fail to mention is coming off of a very odd wrist injury. He has a history of dealing with a lot of injuries already. So it doesn't take away from how great he is, obviously, on the field. He's dealt with a lot of injuries compared to Deshaun Watson, also dealing with some injuries himself. And in the time that Joe has played, he has very convincingly been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So without any of these other guys being guarantees right now, it does make me worry about Joe and whether or not it's just too much for him coming off of this injury. Of course, he'll never say that it is, but with that urge to win, that drive to win, I feel like it could lead to some unfortunate conclusions with the Bengals if they overwork or put too much pressure on Joe coming off of that injury. So I couldn't move him past 3 for that reason. But at number 2, a non-negotiable, I had the Steelers for a couple of reasons. I know they are probably a lot of people's favorite to be third or even last in this division. And I would be lying to say if I didn't understand why. You look at the quarterback issues, the new coordinator coming in, the lack of weapons at wide receiver. It's looking more and more reasonable to put them lower than number 2, but I can't put them lower than number 2 because of the fact that last year they finished with 10 wins and they were cycling through 3 quarterbacks that were worse than the quarterbacks they currently have on their team right now. And not to mention only that, but they got better by adding a guy like Patrick Queen. They are projecting a lot of success to come from their young players. You look at Troy Fautanu, their starting center, Zach Frazier now also. Young guys that they're starting at very crucial positions. That is something that they're projecting to work out for them, so that is a concern. But at quarterback, I can't say that they got worse. It is a question still, but they definitely didn't get worse, and they got 10 wins last year. Mike Tomlin, one of the best coaches in the NFL. Coaching certainly matters when trying to decide in this situation who will finish on top of any other team. So having Mike Tomlin there, I think, benefits them greatly. And their schedule is the 3rd toughest in the NFL. So that is a concern as well again. But they don't have a division game until week 11, which is good and bad, I guess you could say, in a sense, right? The first half of your schedule isn't something that is considered too hard for some of the games that you play, but after that, the last weeks where you play all of your divisional matchups, and then on top of that, the Chiefs and the Eagles in those last couple 7 to 6 weeks there at the end of the season are going to be crucial for this team. But I feel like they're being written off like they always do, but I feel like compared to the Browns with Deshaun at that position, more quarterback doubts like the Steelers, and with the Bengals, doubts around all their playmakers, I think it's closer than a lot of people want to give them credit for, and that's why I had the Steelers number 2. But also on that topic, mentioning how close everybody pretty much is, I have the Ravens finishing first just for the fact that it's hard to put him anywhere else. Adding a guy like Derrick Henry, right? It almost makes it seem that you think that they're getting worse by adding Derrick Henry. So I feel like they have enough to finish first. Adding Derrick, having Lamar come off of his MVP season. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't any doubts around this team, right? They lost 3 starters on their offensive line, which is a major concern for me. Which again was why I had such a tough time deciding who was going to finish in each of these spots in this division. But they have those losses. They also lost on the defensive side of the ball. They lost Patrick Queen, Geno Stone, Javon Clowney. Could be a big loss in each of those players for this overall defense. They have a new defensive coordinator. How do they make that transition? It's all very new, but in the same breath, I feel like they have enough just with Lamar and Derrick coming in there as well. They have a lot of expectations for Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers coming in his second year, Mark Andrews, hopefully he stays injured or stays healthy for the entire year after dealing with that ankle injury last year. So I feel like they have enough with some of these players, and the style that they play is very tough to defend against, even though they do have the second toughest schedule in the NFL, especially on the road this year, playing all of their AFC North opponents obviously on the road, but also playing games at Houston, at Dallas, at the Bucs, and at Kansas City, obviously this Thursday. There is some questionable aspects from this Ravens team, but I had to rank them somehow, and this is how I finished off this rankings. It could be pretty accurate, but I could either see any of these teams, maybe other than the Browns, finishing first or finishing second, third. And what's crazy about it is that whichever teams finish 1 through 3 are probably all going to make the playoffs. So the rankings go as far as you would, depending on wanting the number 1 seed or anything like that, or having a home game in the playoffs. But really, I feel like everyone wants to just make the playoffs, and all of these teams are so good that it always seems to be that 3 of these teams make the playoffs anyway. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you agree with my rankings. Do you think I'm completely off? I would completely understand that, just because the AFC North is very unpredictable. Anybody could finish first, probably. So it makes it one of the best divisions to see in football. And we're just a couple days away from not only seeing that, but seeing the entire NFL return once those games kick off on Thursday, leading into the weekend as well. But that is going to do it for today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. Thank you guys also for tuning into today's episode. Please remember also to follow the network on all forms of social media and checking out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, to catch more content around this show, around also some more NFL topics in a variety of different ways. And lastly, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more coverage around the NFL and more discussions with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you for joining me on today's show, and I hope to see you back here again with me tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to